The Mahabharata. Of Krishnadwaipayana Vyasa. Book 1. Adi Parva. Section 13. Astika Parva. Saunaka said, for what reason did that tiger among kings, the royal Janamejaya, determine to take the lives of the snakes by means of a sacrifice? O Soti, tell us in full the true story. Tell us also why Astika, that best of regenerate ones, that foremost of ascetics, rescued the snakes from the blazing fire. Whose son was that monarch who celebrated the snake sacrifice? And whose son also was that best of regenerate ones? Soti said, O best of speakers, this story of Astika is long. I will duly relate it in full, O listen. Saunaka said, I am desirous of hearing at length the charming story of that Rishi, that illustrious Brahmana named Astika. Soti said, this history, first, recited by Krishnadwaipayana, is called a Purana by the Brahmanas. It was formerly narrated by my wise father, Lomaharshana, the disciple of Vyasa, before the dwellers of the Nyamisha forest, at their request. I was present at the recital, and, O Saunaka, since thou askest me, I shall narrate the history of Astika exactly as I heard it. O listen, as I recite in full that sin-destroying story. The father of Astika was powerful like Prajapati. He was a brahmacharin, always engaged in austere devotions. He ate sparingly, was a great ascetic, and had his lust under complete control. And he was known by the name of Jarakaru, that foremost one among the Yayavaras. Virtuous and of rigid vows, highly blessed and endued with great ascetic power, once undertook a journey over the world. He visited diverse places, bathed in diverse sacred waters, and rested where night overtook him. Endued with great energy, he practiced religious austerities, hard to be practiced by men of unrestrained souls. The sage lived upon air only, and renounced sleep forever, thus going about like a blazing fire. One day he happened to see his ancestors, hanging heads down in a great hole, their feet pointing upwards. On seeing them, Jarakaru addressed them, saying, Who are you thus hanging heads down in this hole by a rope of Virana fibers that is again secretly eaten into on all sides by a rat living here? The ancestors said, We are rishis of rigid vows, called Yayavaras. We are sinking low into the earth for want of offspring. We have a son named Jarakaru. Woe to us! That wretch hath entered upon a life of austerities only. The fool doth not think of raising offspring by marriage. It is for that reason, viz., the fear of extinction of our race, that we are suspended in this hole. Possessed of means, we fare like unfortunates that have none. O excellent one, who art thou that thus sorrowest as a friend on our account? We desire to learn, O Brahmana, who thou art that standest by us, and why, O best of men, thou sorrowest for us that are so unfortunate. Jarakaru said, Yea, or even my sires and grandsires, I am that. Jarakaru. Oh, tell me, how I may serve you. The fathers then answered, Try thy best, O child, to beget a son to extend our line. Thou wilt then, O excellent one, have done a meritorious art for both thyself and us. Not by the fruits of virtue, not by ascetic penances well hoarded up, acquireth the merit which one doth by becoming a father. Therefore, O child, by our command, set thy heart upon marriage and offspring. Even this is our highest good. Jarakaru replied, I shall not marry for my sake, nor shall I earn wealth for enjoyment, but I shall do so for your welfare only. According to this understanding, I shall, agreeably to the sastric ordinance, take a wife for attaining the end. I shall not act otherwise. If a bride may be had of the same name with me, whose friends would, besides, willingly give her to me as a gift in charity, I shall wed her duly. But who will give his daughter to a poor man like me for wife? I shall, however, accept any daughter given to me as alms. I shall endeavor, yes sires, even thus to wed a girl. Having given my word, I will not act otherwise. Upon her I will raise offspring for your redemption, so that, ye fathers, ye may attain to eternal regions, of bliss, and may rejoice as ye like. So ends the 13th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 14. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, that Brahmana of rigid vows then wandered over the earth. For a wife but a wife found he not. One day he went into the forest, and, recollecting the words of his ancestors, he thrice prayed in a faint voice for a bride. Thereupon Vasuki rose and offered his sister for the Rishi's acceptance. But the Brahmana hesitated to accept her, thinking her not to be of the same name with himself. The high-souled Jarakaru thought within himself, I will take none for wife who is not of the same name with myself. Then that Rishi of great wisdom and austere penances asked him, saying, Tell me truly what is the name of this thy sister, O snake? Vasuki replied, O Jarakaru, this my younger sister is called Jarakaru. Given away by me, accept this slender-waisted damsel for thy spouse. O best of Brahmanas, for thee I reserved her. Therefore, take her. Saying this, he offered his beautiful sister to Jarakaru, who then espoused her with ordained rites. So ends the 13th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 15. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, O foremost of persons acquainted with Brahma, the mother of the snakes had cursed them of old, saying, He that hath the wind for his charioteer, viz., Agni, shall burn you all in Janam Jaya's sacrifice. It was to neutralize that curse that the chief of the snakes married his sister to that high-souled Rishi of excellent vows. The Rishi wedded her according to the rites ordained in the scriptures, and from them was born a high-souled son called Astika. An illustrious ascetic, versed in the Vedas and their branches, he regarded all with an even eye, and removed the fears of both his parents. Then, after a long space of time, a king descending from the Pandava line celebrated a great sacrifice known as the snake sacrifice. After that sacrifice had commenced for the destruction of the snakes, Astika delivered the Nagas, viz., his brothers and maternal uncles and other snakes, from a fiery death. And he delivered his fathers also by begetting offspring. And by his austerities, O Brahmana, and various vows and study of the Vedas, he freed himself from all his debts. By sacrifices, at which various kinds of offerings were made, he propitiated the gods. By practicing the Brahmacharya mode of life he conciliated the Rishis, and by begetting offspring he gratified his ancestors. Thus Jarakaru of rigid vows discharged the heavy debt he owed to his sires, who being thus relieved from bondage ascended to heaven. Thus, having acquired great religious merit, Jarakaru, after a long course of years, went to heaven, leaving Astika behind. There is the story of Astika that I have related duly. Now, tell me, O tiger of Bhrigu's race, what else I shall narrate. So ends the 15th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 16. Astika Parva continued. Saunaka said, O Soti, relate once more in detail this history of the learned and virtuous Astika. Our curiosity for hearing it is great. O amiable one, thou speakest sweetly, with proper accent and emphasis, and we are well pleased with thy speech. Thou speakest even as thy father. Thy sire was ever ready to please us. Tell us now the story as thy father had related it. Soti said, O thou that art blessed with longevity, I shall narrate the history of Astika as I heard it from my father. O Brahmana, in the golden age, Prajapati had 2 daughters. O sinless one, the sisters were endowed with wonderful beauty. Named Kadru and Vinata, they became the wives of Kashyapa. Kashyapa derived great pleasure from his 2 wedded wives and, being gratified he, resembling Prajapati himself, offered to give each of them a boon. Hearing that their lord was willing to confer on them their choice blessings, those excellent ladies felt transports of joy. Kadru wished to have for sons 1,000 snakes all of equal splendor. And Vinata wished to bring forth 2 sons surpassing the 1,000 offsprings of Kadru in strength, energy, size of body, and prowess. Unto Kadru her Lord gave that boon about a multitude of offspring. And unto Vinata also. Kashyapa said, Be it so. Then Vinata, having obtained her prayer, rejoiced greatly. Obtaining 2 sons of superior prowess, she regarded her boon fulfilled. Kadru also obtained her 1,000 sons of equal splendor. Bear the embryos carefully, said Kashyapa, and then he went into the forest, leaving his 2 wives pleased with his blessings. Soti continued, O best of regenerate ones, after a long time, Kadru brought forth 1,000 eggs, and Vinata too. Their maidservants deposited the eggs separately in warm vessels. 500 years passed away, and the 1,000 eggs produced by Kadru burst, and out came the progeny. But the twins of Vinata did not appear. Vinata was jealous, and therefore she broke one of the eggs and found in it an embryo with the upper part developed but the lower one undeveloped. At this, the child in the egg became angry and cursed his mother, saying, Since thou hast prematurely broken this egg, thou shalt serve as a slave. Shouldst thou wait 500 years and not destroy, or render the other egg half developed, by breaking it through impatience, then the illustrious child within it will deliver thee from slavery. And if thou wouldst have the child strong, thou must take tender care of the egg for all this time. Thus cursing his mother, the child rose to the sky. O Brahmana! Even he is the charioteer of Surya, always seen in the hour of morning. Then at the expiration of the 500 years, bursting open the other egg, out came Garuda, the serpent-eater. O tiger of Bhrigu's race! Immediately on seeing the light, that son of Vinata left his mother. And the lord of birds, feeling hungry, took wing in quest of the food assigned to him by the great ordainer of all. So ends the 16th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 17. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, O ascetic, about this time the 2 sisters saw approaching near, that steed of complacent appearance named Uchchesravas, who was worshipped by the gods, that gem of steeds, who arose at the churning of the ocean for nectar. Divine, graceful, perpetually young, creations. Masterpiece, and of irresistible vigor, it was blessed with every auspicious mark. Saunika asked, Why did the gods churn the ocean for nectar, and under what circumstances and when, as you say, did that best of steeds so powerful and resplendent spring? Soti said, There is a mountain named Meru, of blazing appearance, and looking like a heap of effulgence. The rays of the sun falling on its peaks of golden luster are dispersed by them. Decked with gold and exceedingly beautiful, that mountain is the haunt of the gods and the Gandharvas. It is immeasurable and unapproachable by men of manifold sins. Dreadful beasts of prey wander over its breasts, and it is illuminated by many divine life-giving herbs. It stands kissing the heavens by its height and is the first of mountains. Ordinary people cannot even think of ascending it. It is graced with trees and streams, and resounds with the charming melody of winged choirs. Once the celestials sat on its begemmed peak in conclave. They who had practiced penances and observed excellent vows for Amrita now seemed to be eager seekers alter Amrita, celestial ambrosia. Seeing the celestial assembly in anxious mood, Narayana said to Brahman, "Do thou churn the ocean with the gods and the Asuras. By doing so, Amrita will be obtained as also all drugs and gems. O ye gods, chum the ocean, ye will discover Amrita." So ends the 17th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 18. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, "There is a mountain called Mandara adorned with cloud-like peaks. It is the best of mountains, and is covered all over with intertwining herbs. There countless birds pour forth their melodies, and beasts of prey roam about. The gods, the Apsaras, and the Kinnaras visit the place. Upwards it rises 11,000 yojanas, and descends downwards as much. The gods wanted to tear it up and use it as a churning rod, but failing to do so, same to Vishnu and Brahman who were sitting together, and said unto them, Devise some efficient scheme, consider, ye gods, how Mandara may be dislodged for our good. Soti continued, O son of Bhrigu, Vishnu with Brahman assented to it. And the lotus-eyed one, Vishnu, laid the hard task on the mighty Ananta, the prince of snakes. The powerful Ananta, directed thereto both by Brahman and Narayana, O Brahmana, tore up the mountain with the woods thereon and with the denizens of those woods. And the gods came to the shore of the ocean with Ananta and addressed the ocean, saying, O ocean, we have come to churn thy waters for obtaining nectar. And the ocean replied, Be it so, as I shall not go without a share of it. I am able to bear the prodigious agitation of my waters set up by the mountain. The gods then went to the king of tortoises and said to him, O tortoise king, thou wilt have to hold the mountain on thy back. The tortoise king agreed, and Indra contrived to place the mountain on the former's back. And the gods and the Asuras made of Mandara a churning staff and Vasuki the cord, and set about churning the deep for Amrita. The Asuras held Vasuki by the hood and the gods held him by the tail. And Ananta, who was on the side of the gods, at intervals raised the snake's hood and suddenly lowered it. And in consequence of the stretch Vasuki received at the hands of the gods and the Asuras, black vapors with flames issued from his mouth. These, turned into clouds charged with lightning, poured showers that refreshed the tired gods, and flowers that also fell on all sides of the celestials from the trees on the whirling Mandara, refreshed them. Then, O Brahmana, out of the deep came a tremendous roar like unto the roar of the clouds at the universal dissolution. Diverse aquatic animals, being crushed by the great mountain, gave up the ghost in the salt waters. And many denizens of the lower regions and the world of Varuna were killed. Large trees with birds on the whirling Mandara were torn up by the roots and fell into the water. The mutual friction of those trees also produced fires that blazed up frequently. The mountain thus looked like a mass of dark clouds charged with lightning. O Brahmana, the fire spread, and consumed the lions, elephants, and other creatures that were on the mountain. Then Indra extinguished that fire by pouring down heavy showers. After the churning, O Brahmana, had gone on for some time, gummy exudations of various trees and herbs vested with the properties of Amrita mingled with the waters of the ocean. And the celestials attained to immortality by drinking of the water mixed with those gums and with the liquid extract of gold. By degrees, the milky water of the agitated deep turned into clarified butter by virtue of those gums and juices. But nectar did not appear even then. The gods came before the boon granting Brahman seated on his seat and said, Sire, we are spent up, we have no strength left to churn further. Nectar hath not yet arisen, so that now we have no resource save Narayana. On hearing them, Brahman said to Narayana, O Lord, condescend to grant the gods strength to churn the deep afresh. Then Narayana, agreeing to grant their various prayers, said, Ye wise ones, I grant you sufficient strength. Go, put the mountain in position again and churn the water. Re-established thus in strength, the gods recommenced churning. After a while, the mild moon of 1,000 rays emerged from the ocean. Thereafter sprung forth Lakshmi dressed in white, then Soma, then the white steed, and then the celestial gem Kaustubha which graces the breast of Narayana. Then Lakshmi, Soma, and the steed, fleet as the mind, all came before the gods on high. Then arose the divine Dhanvantari himself, with the white vessel of nectar in his hand. And seeing him, the Asuras set up a loud cry, saying, It be ours. And at length rose the great elephant, Airavata, of huge body and with 2 pair of white tusks. And him took Indra the wielder of the thunderbolt. But with the churning still going on, the poison Kalakuta appeared at last. Engulfing the earth, it suddenly blazed up like a fire, attended with fumes. And by the scent of the fearful Kalakuta, the 3 worlds were stupefied. And then Shiva, being solicited by Brahman, swallowed that poison for the safety of the creation. The divine Mahesvara held it in his throat, and it is said that from that time he is called Nilkantha, blue-throat. Seeing all these wondrous things, the Asuras were filled with despair, and got themselves prepared for entering into hostilities with the gods for the possession of Lakshmi and Amrita. Thereupon Narayana called his bewitching Maya, elusive power, to his aid, and assuming the form of an enticing female, coquetted with the Danavas. The Danavas and the Daityas, charmed with her exquisite beauty and grace, lost their reason and unanimously placed the Amrita in the hands of that fair damsel. So ends the 18th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 19. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, Then the Daityas and the Danavas, equipped with first-class armors and various weapons, attacked the gods. In the meantime the valiant Lord Vishnu, in the form of an enchantress accompanied by Nara, deceived the mighty Danavas and took away the Amrita from their hands. And all the gods at that time of great fright drank the Amrita with delight, receiving it from Vishnu. And while the gods were partaking of it, after which they had so much hankered, a Danava named Rahu was also drinking it among them in the guise of a god. And when the Amrita had reached Rahu's throat only, Surya and Soma recognized him and intimated the fact to the gods. And Narayana instantly cut off with his discus the well-adorned head of the Danava who was drinking the Amrita without permission. And the huge head of the Danava, cut off by the discus and resembling a mountain peak, then rose up to the sky and began to utter dreadful cries. And the Danava's headless trunk, falling upon the ground and rolling thereon, made the earth tremble with her mountains, forests and islands. And from that time there is a long-standing quarrel between Rahu's head and Surya and Soma. And to this day it swalloweth Surya and Soma, during solar and lunar eclipses. Then Narayana, quitting his enchanting female form and hurling many terrible weapons at the Danavas, made them tremble. And thus on the shores of the salt water sea, commenced the dreadful battle of the gods and the Asuras. And sharp-pointed javelins and lances and various weapons by thousands began to be discharged on all sides, and mangled with the discus and wounded with swords, darts, and maces, the Asuras in large numbers vomited blood and lay prostrate on the earth. Cut off from the trunks with sharp double-edged swords, heads adorned with bright gold fell continually on the field of battle, their bodies drenched in gore. The great Asuras lay dead everywhere. It seemed as if red-dyed mountain peaks lay scattered all around. And when the sun rose in his splendor, thousands of warriors struck one another with weapons, and cries of distress were heard everywhere. The warriors fighting at a distance from one another brought one another down by sharp iron missiles, and those fighting at close quarters slew one another with blows of their fists. And the air was filled with shrieks of distress. Everywhere were heard the alarming sounds: cut, pierce, at them, hurl down, advance. And when the battle was raging fiercely, Nara and Narayana entered the field. And Narayana, seeing the celestial bow in the hand of Nara, called to mind his own weapon, the Danava-destroying discus. And lo! The discus, Sudarsana, destroyer of enemies, like to Agni in effulgence and dreadful in battle, came from the sky as soon as thought of. And when it came, Narayana, of fierce energy, possessing arms like the trunk of an elephant, hurled with great force that weapon of extraordinary luster, effulgent as blazing fire, dreadful and capable of destroying hostile towns. And that discus, blazing like the fire that consumeth all things at the end of Yuga, hurled with force from the hands of Narayana, and falling constantly everywhere, destroyed the Daityas and the Danavas by thousands. Sometimes it blazed like fire and consumed them all, sometimes it struck them down as it coursed through the sky, and sometimes, falling on the earth, it drank their lifeblood like a goblin. On the other hand, the Danavas, white as the clouds from which the rain hath dropped, possessing great strength and bold hearts, ascended the sky, and by hurling down thousands of mountains, continually harassed the gods. And those dreadful mountains, like masses of clouds, with their trees and flat tops, falling from the sky, collided with one another and produced a tremendous roar. And when thousands of warriors shouted without intermission in the field of battle, and mountains with the woods thereon began to fall around, the earth with her forests trembled. Then the divine Nara appeared at the scene of the dreadful conflict between the Asuras and the Ganas, the followers of Rudra, and reducing to dust those rocks by means of his gold-headed arrows, he covered the heavens with dust. Thus discomfited by the gods, and seeing the furious discus scouring the fields of heaven like a blazing flame, the mighty Danavas entered the bowels of the earth, while others plunged into the sea of salt waters. And having gained the victory, the gods offered due respect to Mandara, and placed him again on his own base. And the nectar-bearing gods made the heavens resound with their shouts, and went to their own abodes. And the gods, on returning to the heavens, rejoiced greatly, and Indra and the other deities made over to Narayana the vessel of Amrita for careful keeping. And so ends the 19th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XX. Astika Parva continued. Sodhi said, thus have I recited to you the whole story of how Amrita was churned out of the ocean, and the occasion on which the horse Uchchesravas of great beauty and incomparable prowess was obtained. It was this horse about which Kadru asked Vinata, saying, "Tell me, amiable sister, without taking much time, of what color Uchchesravas is." And Vinata answered, "That prince of steeds is certainly white." "What dost thou think, sister? Say thou what is its color. Let us lay a wager upon it." Kadru replied, "Then, O thou of sweet smiles, I think that horse is black in its tail. Beauteous one, bet with me that she who loseth will become the other's slave." So they continued, thus wagering with each other about menial service as a slave. The sisters went home, and resolved to satisfy themselves by examining the horse next day. And Kadru, bent upon practicing a deception, ordered her 1,000 sons to transform themselves into black hair and speedily cover the horse's tail in order that she might not become a slave. But her sons, the snakes, refusing to do her bidding, she cursed them, saying, during the snake sacrifice of the wise king Janamejaya of the Pandava race, Agni shall consume you all. And the grandsire, Brahman, himself heard this exceedingly cruel curse pronounced by Kadru, impelled by the fates. And seeing that the snakes had multiplied exceedingly, the grandsire, moved by kind consideration for his creatures, sanctioned with all the gods this curse of Kadru. Indeed, as the snakes were of virulent poison, great prowess and excess of strength, and ever bent on biting other creatures, their mother's conduct towards them, those persecutors of all creatures, was very proper for the good of all creatures. Fate always inflicts punishment of death on those who seek the death of other creatures. The gods, having exchanged such sentiments with one another, supported Kadru's action, and went away. And Brahman, calling Kashyapa to him, spake unto him these words: "O thou pure one who overcomest all enemies, these snakes begotten by you, who are of virulent poison and huge bodies, and ever intent on biting other creatures, have been cursed by their mother. O son, do not grieve for it in the least. The destruction of the snakes in the sacrifice hath, indeed, been ordained long ago." Saying this, the divine Creator of the universe comforted Kashyapa and imparted to that illustrious one the knowledge of neutralizing poison. And so ends the 20th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXI. Astika Parva continued. Soti said. Then when the night had passed away and the sun had risen in the morning, O thou whose wealth is asceticism, the two sisters Kadru and Vinata, having laid a wager about slavery, went with haste and impatience to view the steed Uchchesravas from a near point. On their way they saw the ocean, that receptacle of waters, vast and deep, rolling and tremendously roaring, full of fishes large enough to swallow the whale, and abounding with huge makaras and creatures of various forms by thousands, and rendered inaccessible by the presence of other terrible monster-shaped, dark, and fierce aquatic animals, abounding with tortoises and crocodiles, the mine of all kinds of gems, the home of Varuna, the water god, the excellent and beautiful residence of the Nagas, the lord of all rivers, the abode of the subterranean fire, the friend, or asylum, of the Asuras, the terror of all creatures, the grand reservoir of water, and ever immutable. It is holy, beneficial to the gods, and is the great source of nectar, without limits, inconceivable, sacred, and highly wonderful. It is dark, terrible with the sound of aquatic creatures, tremendously roaring, and full of deep whirlpools. It is an object of terror to all creatures. Moved by the winds blowing from its shores and heaving high, agitated and disturbed, it seems to dance everywhere with uplifted hands represented by its surges. Full of swelling billows caused by the waxing and waning of the moon, the parent of Vasudev's great conch called Panchajanya, the great mine of gems. Its waters were formerly disturbed in consequence of the agitation caused within them by the Lord Govinda of immeasurable prowess when he had assumed the form of a wild boar for raising the submerged earth. Its bottom, lower than the nether regions, the vow-observing regenerate Rishi Atri could not fathom after toiling for 100 years. It becomes the bed of the lotus-naveled Vishnu when at the termination of every yuga that deity of immeasurable power enjoys yoganidra, the deep sleep under the spell of spiritual meditation. It is the refuge of Menaka fearful of falling thunder, and the retreat of the Asuras overcome in fierce encounters. It offers water as sacrificial butter to the blazing fire issuing from the mouth of Bhairava, the ocean mare. It is fathomless and without limits, vast and immeasurable, and the Lord of rivers. And they saw that unto it rushed mighty rivers by thousands with proud gait, like amorous competitors, each eager for meeting it, forestalling the others. And they saw that it was always full, and always dancing in its waves. And they saw that it was deep and abounding with fierce whales and makaras. And it resounded constantly with the terrible sounds of aquatic creatures. And they saw that it was vast, and wide as the expanse of space, unfathomable, and limitless, and the grand reservoir of water. And so ends the 21st section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXII. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, the Nagas after consultation arrived at the conclusion that they should do their mother's bidding, for if she failed in obtaining her desire she might withdraw her affection and burn them all. If, on the other hand, she were graciously inclined, she might free them from her curse. They said, we will certainly render the horse's tail black. And it is said that they then went and became hairs in the horse's tail. Now the two co-wives had laid the wager. And having laid the wager, O best of Brahmanas, the two sisters Kadru and Vinata, the daughters of Daksha, proceeded in great delight along the sky to see the other side of the ocean. And on their way they saw the ocean, that receptacle of waters, incapable of being easily disturbed, mightily agitated all of a sudden by the wind, and roaring tremendously, abounding with fishes, capable of swallowing the whale and full of makaras, containing also creatures of diverse forms counted by thousands, frightful from the presence of horrible monsters, inaccessible, deep, and terrible, the mine of all kinds of gems, the home of Varuna, the water god, the wonderful habitations of the Nagas, the lord of rivers, the abode of the subterranean fire, the residence of the Asuras and of many dreadful creatures, the reservoir of water, not subject to decay, aromatic, and wonderful, the great source of the Amrita of the celestials, immeasurable and inconceivable, containing waters that are holy, filled to the brim by many thousands of great rivers, dancing as it were in waves. Such was the ocean, full of rolling waves, vast as the expanse of the sky, deep, of body lighted with the flames of subterranean fire, and roaring, which the sisters quickly passed over. And so ends the 22nd section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXIII. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, having crossed the ocean, Kadru of swift speed, accompanied by Vinata, soon alighted near the horse. They then both beheld that foremost of steeds of great speed, with body white as the rays of the moon but having black hairs, in the tail. And observing many black hairs in the tail, Kadru put Vinata, who was deeply dejected, into slavery. And thus Vinata, having lost the wager, entered into a state of slavery and became exceedingly sorry. In the meantime, when his time came, burst forth from the egg without the help of his mother, Garuda of great splendor, enkindling all the points of the universe, that mighty being endued with strength, that bird capable of assuming at will any form, of going at will everywhere, and of calling to his aid at will any measure of energy. Effulgent like a heap of fire, he shone terribly. Of luster equal to that of the fire at the end of the yuga, his eyes were bright like the lightning flash. And soon after birth, that bird grew in size and increasing his body ascended the skies. Fierce and vehemently roaring, he looked as terrible as second ocean fire. And all the deities seeing him, sought the protection of Vibhavasu, Agni. And they bowed down to that deity of manifold forms, seated on his seat, and spake unto him these words, O Agni, extend not thy body. Wilt thou consume us? Lo, this huge heap of thy flames is spreading wide. And Agni replied, O, ye persecutors of the Asuras, it is not as ye imagine. This is Garuda of great strength and equal to me in splendor, endued with great energy, and born to promote the joy of Vinata. Even the sight of this heap of effulgence hath caused this delusion in you. He is the mighty son of Kashyapa, the destroyer of the Nagas, engaged in the well-being of the gods, and the foe of the Daityas and the Rakshasas. Be not afraid of it in the least. Come with me and see. Thus addressed, the gods from a distance. The gods said, Thou art a rishi, i.e., one cognizant of all mantras. Share of the largest portion in sacrifices, ever resplendent, the controller along with the rishi wended their way towards Garuda and adored him of birds, the presiding spirit of the animate and the inanimate universe. Thou art the destroyer of all, the creator of all. Thou art the very Hiranyagarbha, thou art the progenitor of creation in the form of Daksha and the other Prajaptis, thou art Indra, the king of the gods, thou art Hayagriva the steed-necked incarnation of Vishnu. Thou art the arrow, Vishnu himself, as he became such in the hands of Mahadeva at the burning of Tripura, thou art the Lord of the universe. Thou art the mouth of Vishnu, thou art the four-faced Padmaja, thou art the Brahmana, i.e., wise, thou art Agni, Pavna, etc., i.e., the presiding deity of every object in the universe. Thou art knowledge. Thou art the illusion to which we are all subject, thou art the all-pervading spirit, thou art the Lord of the gods, thou art the great truth, thou art fearless, thou art ever unchanged, thou art Brahma. Without attributes, thou art the energy of the sun, thou art the intellectual functions, thou art our great protector, thou art the ocean of holiness, thou art purity, thou art bereft of the attributes of darkness, thou art the possessor of the 6 high attributes, thou art he who cannot be withstood in contest. From thee have emanated all things. Thou art of excellent deeds, thou art all that hath not been and all that hath been. Thou art pure knowledge, thou displayest to us, as Surya does. By his rays, this animate and inanimate universe, thou darkenest the splendor of Surya at every moment, and thou art the destroyer of all. Thou art all that is perishable and all that is imperishable. O thou, resplendent as Agni, thou burnest all even as Surya in his anger burneth all creatures. O terrible one, thou resistest even as the fire that destroys everything at the time of the universal dissolution. O mighty Garuda who movest in the skies, we seek thy protection. O Lord of birds, thy energy is extraordinary, thy splendor is that of fire, thy brightness is like that of the lightning that no darkness can approach. Thou reachest the very clouds, and art both the cause and the effect, the dispenser of boons and invincible in prowess. O Lord, this whole universe is rendered hot by thy splendor, bright as the luster of heated gold. Protect these high-souled gods, who overcome by thee and terrified withal, are flying along the heavens in different directions on their celestial cars. O thou best of birds, thou Lord of all, thou art the Son of the merciful and high-souled Rishi Kashyapa, therefore, be not wroth, but have mercy on the universe. Thou art supreme. O pacify thy anger and preserve us. At thy voice, loud as the roar of the thunder, the 10 points, the skies, the heavens, the earth, and our hearts, O bird, thou art continuously shaking. O, diminish this thy body resembling Agni. At the sight of the splendor resembling that of Yama when in wrath, our hearts lose all equanimity and quake. O thou Lord of birds, be propitious to us who solicit thy mercy. O illustrious one, bestow on us good fortune and joy. And that bird of fair feathers, thus adored by the deities and diverse sections of rishis, reduced his own energy and splendor. And thus ends the 23rd section in the Astika Parva of the ADI. Parva. Section XXIV. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, then hearing of and beholding his own body, that bird of beautiful feathers diminished its size. And Garuda said, let no creature be afraid, as yet or in a fright at the sight of my terrible form, I shall diminish my energy. Soti continued, then that bird capable of going everywhere at will, that ranger of the skies capable of calling to his aid any measure of energy, bearing Aruna on his back, wended from his father's home and arrived at his mother's side on the other shore of the great ocean. And he placed Aruna of great splendor in the eastern regions, just at a time when Surya had resolved to burn the worlds with his fierce rays. Saunaka said, when did the revered Surya resolve at the time to burn the worlds? What wrong was done to him by the gods that provoked his ire? Soti said, O sinless one, when Rahu was drinking nectar among the gods, at the time of the churning of the ocean he was pointed out to the gods by Surya and Soma, and from that time he conceived an enmity towards those deities. And upon this Rahu sought to devour his afflictor, Surya became wroth, and thought, oh, this enmity of Rahu towards me hath sprung from my desire of benefiting the gods. And this dire consequence I alone have to sustain. Indeed, at this pass help I obtain not. And before the very eyes of the denizens of heaven I am going to be devoured, and they brook it quietly. Therefore, for the destruction of the worlds must I strive. And with this resolution he went to the mountains of the west. And from that place he began to radiate his heat around for the destruction of the world. And then the great rishis, approaching the gods, spake unto them, Lo, in the middle of the night springeth a great heat, striking terror into every heart, and destructive of the three worlds. Then the gods, accompanied by the rishis, wended to the grandsire, and said unto him, O what is this great heat today that causeth such panic? Surya hath not yet risen, still the destruction of the world is obvious. O Lord, what will happen when he doth rise? The grandsire replied, Indeed, Surya is prepared to rise today for the destruction of the world. As soon as he will appear he will burn everything into a heap of ashes. By me, however, hath the remedy been provided beforehand. The intelligent son of Kashyapa is known to all by the name of Aruna. He is huge of body and of great splendor. He shall stay in front of Surya, doing the duty of his charioteer and taking away all the energy of the former. And this will ensure the welfare of the worlds, of the rishis, and of the dwellers in heaven. Soti continued, Aruna, at the behest of the grandsire, did all that he was ordered to do. And Surya rose veiled by Aruna's person. I have told thee now why Surya was in wrath, and how Aruna, the brother of Garuda, was appointed as his charioteer. Hear next of that other question asked by thee a little while ago. And so ends the 24th section in the Astika Parva of the ADI. Parva. Section XXV. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, then that bird of great strength and energy and capable of going at will to every place repaired to his mother's side on the other shore of the great ocean. Thither lived Vinata in affliction, defeated in wager and put into a state of slavery. Once Kadrua calling Vinata who had prostrate herself before the former, addressed her these words in the presence of her son, O gentle Vinata, there is in the midst of the ocean, in a remote quarter, a delightful and fair region inhabited by the Nagas. Bear me thither. At this that mother of the bird of fair feathers bore, on her shoulders, the mother of the snakes. And Garuda also, directed by his mother's words, carried, on his back, the snakes. And that ranger of the skies born of Vinata began to ascend towards the sun. And thereupon the snakes, scorched by the rays of the sun, swooned away. And Kadrua seeing her sons in that state prayed to Indra, saying, I bow to thee, thou lord of all the gods. I bow to thee, thou slayer of Vridra. I bow to thee, thou slayer of Namakya. O thou of 1,000 eyes, consort of Sachi. By thy showers, be thou the protector of the snakes scorched by the Sunday. O thou best of the deities, thou art our great protector. O Purandara, thou art able to grant rain in torrents. Thou art Vayu, the air, the clouds, fire, and the lightning of the skies. Thou art the propeller of the clouds, and hast been called the great cloud, i.e., that which will darken the universe at the end of Yuga. Thou art the fierce and incomparable thunder, and the roaring clouds. Thou art the creator of the worlds and their destroyer. Thou art unconquered. Thou art the light of all creatures, Aditya, Vibhavasu, and the wonderful elements. Thou art the ruler of all the gods. Thou art Vishnu. Thou hast 1,000 eyes. Thou art a god, and the final resource. Thou art, O deity, all Amrita, and the most adored Soma. Thou art the moment, the lunar day, the Bala minute, thou art the Kashana, 4 minutes. Thou art the lighted fortnight, and also the dark fortnight. Thou art Kala, thou Kashtha, and thou Truti one. Thou art the year, the seasons, the months, the nights, and the days. Thou art the fair earth with her mountains and forests. Thou art also the firmament, resplendent with the Sunday. Thou art the great ocean with heaving billows and abounding with whales, swallowers of whales, and makaras, and various fishes. Thou art of great renown, always adored by the wise and by the great rishis with minds wrapped in contemplation. Thou drinkest, for the good of all creatures, the soma juice in sacrifices and the clarified butter offered with sacred invocation. Thou art always worshipped at sacrifices by Brahmanas moved by desire of fruit. O thou of incomparable mass of strength, thou art sung in the Vedas and Vedanas. It is for that reason that learned Brahmanas bent upon performing sacrifices, study the Vedas with every care. And so ends the 25th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXVI. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, and then Indra, the king of gods, having the best of horses for his bearer, thus adored by Kadru, covered the entire firmament with masses of blue clouds. And he commanded the clouds, saying, Pour ye, your vivifying and blessed drops. And those clouds, luminous with lightning, and incessantly roaring against each other in the welkin, poured abundant water. And the sky, in consequence of those wonderful and terribly roaring clouds that were incessantly begetting vast quantities of water, looked as if the end of Yuga had come. And in consequence of the myriads of waves caused in the falling torrents, the deep roar of the clouds, the flashes of lightning, the violence of the wind, and the general agitation, the sky looked as if dancing in madness. The sky became overcast, and the rays of the sun and the moon totally disappeared, in consequence of that incessant downpour. And upon Indra's causing that downpour, the Nagas became exceedingly delighted. And the earth was filled with water all around. And the cool, clear water reached even the nether regions. And there were countless waves of water all over the earth. And the snakes with their mother reached, in safety, the island called Ramani Yaka. And so ends the 26th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXVII. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, and then the Nagas, drenched by that shower, became exceedingly glad. And borne by that bird of fair feathers, they soon arrived at the island. That island had been fixed by the creator of the universe as the abode of the Makaras. There they saw the terrible Lavana Samudra, ocean of salt. On arriving there with Garuda, they saw there a beautiful forest washed by the waters of the sea and resounding with the music of winged choirs. And there were clusters of trees all around laden with various fruits and flowers. And there were also fair mansions all around, and many tanks full of lotuses. And it was also adorned with many lakes of pure water. And it was refreshed with pure incense-breathing breezes. And it was adorned with many a tree that grew only on the hills of Malaya, and seemed by their tallness to reach the very heavens. And there were also various other trees whose flowers were scattered all around by the breeze. And that forest was charming and dear to the Gandharvas and always gave them pleasure. And it was full of bees, maddened with the honey they sucked. And the sight of all this was exceedingly delightful. And in consequence of many things there, capable of charming everybody, that forest was fair, delightful, and holy. And echoing with the notes of various birds, it delighted greatly the sons of Kadru. And the snakes, after arriving at that forest, began to enjoy themselves. And they commanded the Lord of birds, viz., Garuda, of great energy, saying, Convey us to some other fair island with pure water. Thou arranger of the skies, thou must have seen many fair regions while coursing through the air. Garuda, alter reflecting for a few moments, asked his mother Vinata, saying, Why, mother, have I to do the bidding of the snakes? Vinata, thus questioned by him, spake unto that ranger of the skies, her son, invested with every virtue, of great energy, and great strength, as follows. Vinata said, O thou best of birds, I have become, from misfortune, the slave of my co-wife. The snakes, by an act of deception, caused me to lose my bet and have made me so. When his mother had told him the reason, that ranger of the skies dejected with grief, addressed the snakes, saying, "Tell me, ye snakes, by bringing what thing, gaining a knowledge of what thing, or doing what act of prowess, we may be freed from this state of bondage to you." Soti continued, the snakes, hearing him, said, "Bring thou Amrita by force. Then, O bird, shall you be freed from bondage." And so ends the 27th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXVIII. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, Garuda, thus addressed by the snakes, then said unto his mother, "I shall go to bring Amrita, I desire to eat something in the way. Direct me to it." Vinata replied, "In a remote region in the midst of the ocean, the Nishadas have their fair home. Having eaten the thousands of Nishadas that live there, bring thou Amrita. But let not thy heart be ever set on taking the life of a Brahmana. Of all creatures a Brahmana must not be slain. He is, indeed, like fire. A Brahmana, when angry, becomes like fire or the sun, like poison or an edged weapon. A Brahmana, it has been said, is the master of all creatures. For these and other reasons, a Brahmana is the adored of the virtuous. O child, he is never to be slain by thee even in anger. Hostility with Brahmanas, therefore, would not be proper under any circumstances. O sinless one! Neither Agni nor Surya truly can consume so much as does a Brahmana of rigid vows, when angry. By these various indications must thou know a good Brahmana. Indeed, a Brahmana is the firstborn of all creatures, the foremost of the four orders, the father and the master of all. Garuda then asked, O mother, of what form is a Brahmana, of what behavior, and of what prowess? Doth he shine like fire, or is he of tranquil mien? And, O mother, it behoveth thee to tell my inquiring self, those auspicious signs by which I may recognize a Brahmana. Vinata replied, saying, O child, him shouldst thou know as the best amongst Brahmanas who having entered thy throat would torture thee as a fishhook or burn thee as blazing charcoal. A Brahmana must never be slain by thee even in anger. And Vinata, out of affection for her son, again told him these words, him shouldst thou know as a good Brahmana who would not be digested in thy stomach. Although she knew the incomparable strength of her son, yet she blessed him heartily, for, deceived by the snakes, she was very much afflicted by woe. And she said, Let Marut, the god of the winds, protect thy wings, and Surya and Soma thy vertebral regions, let Agni protect thy head, and the Vasus thy whole body. I also, O child, engaged in beneficial ceremonies, shall sit here for your welfare. Go then, O child, in safety to accomplish thy purpose. Soti continued, then Garuda, having heard the words of his mother, stretched his wings and ascended the skies. And endued with great strength, he soon fell upon the Nishadas, hungry and like another Yama. And bent upon slaying the Nishadas, he raised a great quantity of dust that overspread the firmament, and sucking up water from amid the ocean, shook the trees growing on the adjacent mountains. And then that lord of birds obstructed the principal thoroughfares of the town of the Nishadas by his mouth, increasing its orifice at will. And the Nishadas began to fly in great haste in the direction of the open mouth of the great serpent eater. And as birds in great affliction ascend by thousand into the skies when the trees in a forest are shaken by the winds, so those Nishadas blinded by the dust raised by the storm entered the wide extending cleft of Garuda's mouth open to receive them. And then the hungry lord of all rangers of the skies, that oppressor of enemies. Endued with great strength, and moving with greatest zeal ready to achieve his end, closed his mouth, killing innumerable Nishidas following the occupation of fishermen. So ends the 28th section in the Astika Parva of Adi Parva. Section XXIX. Astika Parva continued. Soti continued, a certain Brahmana with his wife had entered the throat of that ranger of the skies. The former began to burn the bird's throat like a piece of flaming charcoal. Him Garuda addressed, saying, O best of Brahmanas, come out soon from my mouth which I open for thee. A Brahmana must never be slain by me, although he may be always engaged in sinful practices. Unto Garuda, who had thus addressed him, that Brahmana said, O, let this woman of the Nisheda caste, who is my wife, also come out with me. And Garuda said, taking the woman also of the Nisheda caste with thee, come out soon. Save thyself without delay, since thou hast not yet been digested by the heat of my stomach. Soti continued, and then that Brahmana, accompanied by his wife of the Nisheda caste, came out, and praising Garuda wended whatever way he liked. And when that Brahmana had come out with his wife, that lord of birds, fleet as the mind, stretching his wings ascended the skies. He then saw his father, and, hailed by him, Garuda, of incomparable prowess, made proper answers. And the great Rishi, Kasyapa, then asked him, O child, is it well with thee? Dost thou get sufficient food every day? Is there food in plenty for thee in the world of men? Garuda replied, my mother is ever well. And so is my brother, and so am I, but, father, I do not always obtain plenty of food, for which my peace is incomplete. I am sent by the snakes to fetch the excellent Amrita. Indeed, I shall fetch it today for emancipating my mother from her bondage. My mother command me, saying, eat thou the Nishidas. I have eaten them by thousands, but my hunger is not appeased. Therefore, O worshipful one, point out to me some other food, by eating which, O master, I may be strong enough to bring away Amrita by force. Thou shouldst indicate some food wherewith I may appease my hunger and thirst. Kasyapa replied, this lake thou seest is sacred. It hath been heard of even in the heavens. There is an elephant, with face downwards, who continually draggeth a tortoise, his elder brother. I shall speak to you in detail of their hostility in former life. Just listen as I tell you why they are here. There was of old a great rishi of the name of Vibhavasu. He was exceedingly wrathful. He had a younger brother of the name of Supritika. The latter was averse to keeping his wealth jointly with his brothers, and Supritika would always speak of partition. After some time his brother Vibhavasu told Supritika, it is from great foolishness that persons blinded by love of wealth always desire to make a partition of their patrimony. After effecting a partition they fight with each other, deluded by wealth. Then again, enemies in the guise of friends cause estrangements between ignorant and selfish men alter they become separated in wealth, and pointing out faults confirm their quarrels, so that the latter soon fall one by one. Absolute ruin very soon overtakes the separated. For these reasons the wise never speak approvingly of partition amongst brothers who, when divided, do not regard the most authoritative sastras and live always in fear of each other. But as thou, Supritika, without regarding my advice impelled by desire of separation, always wishest to make an arrangement about your property, thou shalt become an elephant. Supritika, thus cursed, then spake unto Vibhavasu, Thou also shalt become a tortoise moving in the midst of the waters. And thus on account of wealth those two fools, Supritika and Vibhavasu, from each other's curse, have become an elephant and a tortoise, respectively. Owing to their wrath, they have both become inferior animals. And they are engaged in hostilities with each other, proud of their excessive strength and the weight of their bodies. And in this lake, those two beings of huge bodies are engaged in acts according to their former hostility. Look here, one amongst them, the handsome elephant of huge body, is even now approaching. Hearing his roar, the tortoise also, of huge body, living within the waters, cometh out, agitating the lake violently. And seeing him the elephant, curling his trunk, rusheth into the water. And endued with great energy, with motion of his tusks and forepart of his trunk and tail and feet, he agitates the water of the lake abounding with fishes. And the tortoise also of great strength, with upraised head, cometh forward for an encounter. And the elephant is 6 yojanas in height and twice that measure in circumference. And the height of the tortoise also is 3 yojanas and his circumference 10. Eat thou up both of them that are madly engaged in the encounter and bent upon slaying each other, and then accomplish the task that thou desirest. Eating that fierce elephant which looked like a huge mountain and resembleth a mass of dark clouds, bring thou Amrita. Soti continued, having said so unto Garuda, he, Kasyapa, blessed him, saying, Blessed be thou when thou art in combat with the gods. Let water pitchers filled to the brim, brahmanas, kine, and other auspicious objects, bless thee, thou oviparous one. And, O thou of great strength, when thou art engaged with the gods in combat, let the riks, the yajas, the samas, the sacred sacrificial butter, all the mysteries, Upanishads, constitute thy strength. Garuda, thus addressed by his father, wended to the side of that lake. He saw that expanse of clear water with birds of various kinds all around. And remembering the words of his father, that ranger of the skies, possessed of great swiftness of motion, seized the elephant and the tortoise, one in each claw. And that bird then soared high into the air. And he came upon a sacred place called Alamba and saw many divine trees. And struck by the wind raised by his wings, those trees began to shake with fear. And those divine trees having golden boughs feared that they would break. And the ranger of the sky seeing that those trees capable of granting every wish were quaking with fear, went to other trees of incomparable appearance. And those gigantic trees were adorned with fruits of gold and silver and branches of precious gems. And they were washed with the water of the sea. And there was a large banyan among them, which had grown into gigantic proportions, that spoke unto that Lord of bird coursing towards it with the fleetness of the mind, Sit thou on this large branch of mine extending 100 yojanas and eat the elephant and the tortoise. When that best of birds, of great swiftness, and of body resembling a mountain, quickly alighted upon a bough of that banyan tree, the resort of thousands of winged creatures, that bough also, full of leaves, shook and broke down. So ends the 29th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXX. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, at the very touch by Garuda of great might with his feet, the branch of the tree broke as it was caught by Garuda. Casting his eyes around in wonder, he saw Valakilya rishis hanging therefrom with heads downwards and engaged in ascetic penances, reflecting that if that bough fell down, the rishis would be slain. The mighty one held the elephant and the tortoise still more firmly with his claws, and from fear of slaying the rishis and desire of saving them, held that bough in his beaks, and rose on his wings. The great rishis were struck with wonder at the sight of that act of his which was beyond even the power of the gods, and gave that mighty bird a name. And they said, as this ranger of the skies rises on its wings bearing a heavy burden, let this foremost of birds having snakes for his food be called Garuda, bearer of heavy weight. And shaking the mountains by his wings, Garuda leisurely coursed through the skies. And as he soared with the elephant and the tortoise, in his claws, he beheld various regions underneath. Desiring as he did to save the Valakilyas, he saw not a spot whereon to sit. At last he went to that foremost of mountains called Gandhamadana. There he saw his father Kashyapa engaged in ascetic devotions. Kashyapa also saw his son, that ranger of the skies, of divine form, possessed of great splendor, and energy and strength, and endued with the speed of the wind or the mind. Huge as a mountain peak, a ready smiter like the curse of a Brahmana. Inconceivable, indescribable, frightful to all creatures, possessed of great prowess, terrible, of the splendor of Agni himself, and incapable of being overcome by the deities, Danavas, and invincible Rakshasas. Capable of splitting mountain summits and sucking the ocean itself and destroying the three worlds, fierce, and looking like Yama himself. The illustrious Kashyapa, seeing him approach and knowing also his motive, spoke unto him these words. Kashyapa said, O child, do not commit a rash act, for then thou wouldst have to suffer pain. The Valakilyas, supporting themselves by drinking the rays of the sun, might, if angry, blast thee. Soti continued, Kashyapa then propitiated, for the sake of his son, the Valakilyas of exceeding good fortune and whose sins had been destroyed by ascetic penances. And Kashyapa said, Yet whose wealth is asceticism. The essay of Garuda is for the good of all creatures. The task is great that he is striving to accomplish. It behoveth you to accord him your permission. Soti continued, those ascetics thus addressed by the illustrious Kashyapa, abandoned that vow and went to the sacred mountain of Himavat for purposes of ascetic penances. After those rishis had gone away, the son of Vinata, with voice obstructed by the bow in his beaks, asked his father Kashyapa saying, O illustrious one, where shall I throw this arm of the tree? O illustrious one, indicate to me some region without human beings. Then Kashyapa spoke of a mountain without human beings with caves and dales always covered with snow and incapable of approach by ordinary creatures even in thought. And the great bird bearing that branch, that elephant, and that tortoise, proceeded with great speed towards that mountain. The great arm of the tree with which that bird of huge body flew away could not be girt round with a cord made of 100 cow hides. Garuda, the lord of birds, then flew away for hundreds of thousands of yojanas within the shortest time. And going according to the directions of his father to that mountain almost in a moment, that ranger of the skies let fall the gigantic bough. And it fell with a great noise. And that prince of mountains shook, struck with the storm raised by Garuda's wings. And the trees thereon dropped showers of flowers. And the peaks decked with gems and gold adorning that great mountain itself, were loosened and fell down on all sides. And the falling bough struck down numerous trees which, with golden flowers amid dark foliage, shone there like clouds charged with lightning. And those trees, bright as gold, falling down upon the ground and, dyed with mountain metals, shone as if they were bathed in the rays of the sun. Then that best of birds, Garuda, perching on the summit of that mountain, ate both the elephant and the tortoise, rose on his wings with great speed from the top of the mountain. And various omens began to appear among the gods foreboding fear. Indra's favorite thunderbolt blazed up in affright. Meteors with flames and smoke, loosened from the welkin, shot down during the day. And the weapons of the Vasus, the Rudras, the Adityas, the Subhyas, the Maruts, and other gods, began to spend their force against one another. Such a thing had never happened even during the war between the gods and the Asuras. And the winds blew accompanied with thunder, and meteors fell by thousands. And the sky, though cloudless, roared tremendously. And even he who was the god of gods shed showers of blood. And the flowery garlands on the necks of the gods faded and their prowess suffered diminution. And terrible masses of clouds dropped thick showers of blood. And the dust raised by the winds darkened the splendor of the very coronets of the gods. And he of 1,000 sacrifices, Indra, with the other gods, perplexed with fear at the sight of those dark forebodings, spoke unto Vrihaspati thus, Why, O worshipful one, have these natural disturbances suddenly arisen? No foe do I behold who would oppress us in war. Vrihaspati answered, O chief of the gods, O thou of 1,000 sacrifices, it is from thy fault and carelessness, and owing also to the ascetic penance of the high-souled great rishis, the Valakilyas, that the son of Kashyapa and Vinata, a ranger of the skies endued with great strength and possessing the capacity of assuming at will any form, is approaching to take away the Soma. And that bird, foremost among all, endued with great strength, is able to rob you of the Soma. Everything is possible with him, the unachievable he can achieve. Soti continued, Indra, having heard these words, then spoke unto those that guarded the Amrita, saying, A bird endued with great strength and energy has set his heart on taking away the Amrita. I warn you beforehand, so that he may not succeed in taking it away by force. Vrihaspati has told me that his strength is immeasurable. And the gods hearing of it, were amazed and took precautions. And they stood surrounding the Amrita. And Indra also of great prowess, the wielder of the thunder, stood with them. And the gods wore curious breastplates of gold, of great value, and set with gems, and bright leathern armor of great toughness. And the mighty deities wielded various sharp-edged weapons of terrible shapes, countless in number, emitting, even all of them, sparks of fire with smoke. And they were also armed with many a discus and iron mace, furnished with spikes, and trident, battle-axe, and various kinds of sharp-pointed missiles and polished swords and maces of terrible form, all befitting their respective bodies, and decked with celestial ornaments and resplendent with those bright arms, the gods waited there, their fears allayed. And the gods, of incomparable strength, energy, and splendor, resolved to protect the Amrita, capable of splitting the towns of the Asuras, all displayed themselves in forms resplendent as the fire. And in consequence of the gods standing there, that would be battlefield, owing to hundreds of thousands of maces furnished with iron spikes, shone like another firmament illumined by the rays of the Sunday. So ends the 30th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXXI. Astika Parva continued. Saunaka said, O son of Sudha, what was Indra's fault, what his act of carelessness? How was Garuda born in consequence of the ascetic penances of the Valakilyas? Why also Kashyapa a Brahman had the king of birds for a son? Why, too, was he invincible of all creatures and unslayable of all? Why also was that ranger of the skies capable of going into every place at will and of mustering at will any measure of energy? If these are described in the Purana, I should like to hear them. Soti said, what thou askest me is, indeed, the subject of the Purana. O twice-born one, listen as I briefly recite it all. Once upon a time, when the Lord of creation, G.V.B, was engaged in a sacrifice from desire of offspring, the rishis, the gods, and the Gandharvas, all gave him help. And Indra was appointed by G.V.B to bring the sacrificial fuel, and with him those ascetics the Valakilyas, and all the other deities. And the Lord Indra, taking up according to his own strength, a weight that was mountain-like, brought it without any fatigue. And he saw on the way some rishis, of bodies of the measure of the thumb, all together carrying one single stalk of a palasa, butia, frondosa, leaf. And those rishis were, from want of food, very lean and almost merged in their own bodies. And they were so weak that they were much afflicted when sunk in the water that collected in an indentation on the road produced by the hoof of a cow. And Purandara, proud of his strength, beheld them with surprise, and laughing at them in derision, soon left them behind, insulting them, besides, by passing over their heads. And those rishis being thus insulted were filled with rage and sorrow. And they made preparations for a great sacrifice at which Indra was terrified. Hear, O Saunika, of the wish for accomplishment of which those vow-observing wise and excellent ascetics poured clarified butter of the sacrificial fire with loudly uttered mantras. There shall be another Indra of all gods, capable of going everywhere at will, and of mustering at will any measure of energy, and striking tear into the present, king of the gods. By the fruit of our ascetic penance, let one arise, fleet as the mind, and fierce withal. And the Lord of the celestials of 100 sacrifices, having come to know of this, became very much alarmed and sought the protection of the vow-observing G.V.B. And the Prajapati G.V.B, hearing everything from Indra, went to the Valakilyas and asked them if their sacrifice had been successful. And those truth-speaking rishis replied to him, saying, let it be as thou sayest. And the Prajapati G.V.B, pacifying them, spake unto them as follows, by the word of Brahman, this one, Indra, hath been made the Lord of the 3 worlds. Ye ascetics, ye also are striving to create another Indra. Ye excellent ones, it behoveth you not to falsify the word of Brahman. Let not also this purpose, for accomplishing, which ye are striving, be rendered futile. Let there spring an Indra, Lord, of winged creatures, endued with excess of strength. Be gracious unto Indra who is a suppliant before you. And the Valakilyas, thus addressed by G.V.B, after offering reverence to that first of the munis, viz., the Prajapati G.V.B, spake unto him. The Valakilyas said, O Prajapati, this sacrifice of us all is for an Indra. Indeed this hath also been meant for a son being born unto thee. Let this task be now left to thee. And in this matter do whatsoever thou seest to be good and proper. Soti continued, meanwhile, moved by the desire of offspring, the good daughter of Daksha, the vow-observing, amiable, and fortunate Vinata, her ascetic penances over, having purified herself with a bath in that season, when connubial companionship might prove fruitful, approached her lord. And G.V.B spake unto her, respected one, the sacrifice commenced by me hath borne fruit. What hath been desired by thee shall come to pass. 2. Heroic sons, shall be born unto thee, who shall be the lords of the 3 worlds. By the penances of the Valakilyas and by virtue of the desire with which I commenced my sacrifice, those sons shall be of exceedingly good fortune and worshipped in the 3 worlds. And the illustrious Kasyapa spake unto her again, bear thou these auspicious seeds with great care. These two will be the lords of all winged creatures. These heroic rangers of the skies will be respected in all the worlds, and capable of assuming any form at will. And the Prajapati, gratified with all that took place, then addressed Indra of 100 sacrifices, saying, Thou shalt have 2 brothers of great energy and prowess, who shall be to thee even as the helpmates. From them no injury shall result unto thee. Let thy sorrow cease, thou shalt continue as the Lord of all. Let not, however, the utterers of the name of Brahma be ever again slighted by thee. Nor let the very wrathful ones, whose words are even the thunderbolt, be ever again insulted by thee. Indra, thus addressed, went to heaven, his fears dispelled. And Vinata also, her purpose fulfilled, was exceedingly glad. And she gave birth to 2 sons, Aruna and Garuda. And Aruna, of undeveloped body, became the forerunner of the sun. And Garuda was vested with the lordship over the birds. O thou of Bhrigu's race, hearken now to the mighty achievement of Garuda. So ends the 31st section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXXII. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, O foremost of Brahmanas, the gods having prepared for battle in that way, Garuda, the king of birds, soon came upon those wise ones. And the gods beholding him of excessive strength began to quake with fear, and strike one another with all their weapons. And amongst those that guarded the Soma was Brahmana, the celestial architect, of measureless might, effulgent as the electric fire and of great energy. And after a terrific encounter lasting only a moment, managed by the Lord of birds with his talons, beak, and wings, he lay as dead on the fields. And the ranger of the skies making the worlds dark with the dust raised by the hurricane of his wings, overwhelmed the celestials with it. And the latter, overwhelmed with that dust, swooned away. And the immortals, who guarded the Amrita, blinded by that dust, could no longer see Garuda. Even thus did Garuda agitate the region of the heavens. And even thus he mangled the gods with the wounds inflicted by his wings and beak. Then the god of 1,000 eyes commanded Vayu, the god of wind, saying, Dispel thou this shower of dust soon. O Maruta, this is indeed thy task. Then the mighty Vayu soon drove away that dust. And when the darkness had disappeared, the celestials attacked Garuda. And as he of great might was attacked by the gods, he began to roar aloud, like the great cloud that appeareth in the sky at the end of the yuga, frightening every creature. And that king of birds, of great energy, that slayer of hostile heroes, then rose on his wings. All the wise ones, the celestials, with Indra amongst them armed with double-edged broadswords, iron maces furnished with sharp spikes, pointed lances, maces, bright arrows, and many a discus of the form of the sun, saw him overhead. And the king of birds attacked them on all sides with showers of various weapons and fought exceedingly hard without wavering for a moment. And the son of Vinata, of great prowess blazing in the sky, attacked the gods on all sides with his wings and breast. And blood began to flow copiously from the bodies of the gods mangled by the talons and the beak of Garuda. Overcome by the lord of birds, the Sathyas with the Gandharvas fled eastwards, the Vasus with the Rudras towards the south, the Adityas towards the west, and the twin Aswins towards the north. Gifted with great energy, they retreated fighting, looking back every moment on their enemy. And Garuda had encounters with the Yakshas, a Swakranda of great courage, Rainika, the bold Kirthanika, Tapana, Ulaka, Swazanika, Nimesha, Prarija, and Pulina. And the son of Vinata mangled them with his wings, talons, and beak, like Shiva himself, that chastiser of enemies, and the holder of Panyaka in rage at the end of the Yuga. And those yakshas of great might and courage, mangled all over by that ranger of the skies, looked like masses of black clouds dropping thick showers of blood. And Garuda, depriving them of life, and then went to where the Amrita was. And he saw that it was surrounded on all sides by fire. And the terrible flames of that fire covered the entire sky. And moved by violent winds, they seemed bent on burning the sun himself. The illustrious Garuda then assumed 90 times 90 mouths, and quickly drinking the waters of many rivers with those mouths, and returning with great speed. That chastiser of enemies, having wings for his vehicle, extinguished that fire with that water. And extinguishing that fire, he assumed a very small form, desirous of entering into the place where the Soma was. So ends the 32nd section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXXIII. Astika Parva continued. Santi said, and that bird, assuming a golden body bright as the rays of the sun, entered with great force the region where the Soma was, like a torrent entering the ocean. And he saw, placed near the Soma, a wheel of steel keen-edged, and sharp as the razor, revolving incessantly. And that fierce instrument, of the splendor of the blazing sun and of terrible form, had been devised by the gods for cutting in pieces all robbers of the Soma. Garuda, seeing a passage through it, stopped there for a moment. Diminishing his body, in an instant he passed through the spokes of that wheel. Within the line of the wheel, he beheld, stationed there, for guarding the Soma, 2 great snakes of the effulgence of blazing fire, with tongues bright as the lightning flash, of great energy, with mouth emitting fire, with blazing eyes, containing poison, very terrible, always in anger, and of great activity. Their eyes were ceaselessly inflamed with rage, and were also winkless. He who may be seen by even one of the 2 would instantly be reduced to ashes. The bird of fair feathers suddenly covered their eyes with dust, and unseen by them he attacked them from all sides. And the son of Vinata, that ranger of the skies, attacking their bodies, mangled them into pieces. He then approached the Soma without loss of time. Then the mighty son of Vinata, taking up the Amrita from the place where it was kept, rose on his wings with great speed, breaking into pieces the machine that had surrounded it. And the bird soon came out, taking the Amrita but without drinking it himself. And he then wended on his way without the least fatigue, darkening the splendor of the sun. And the son of Vinata then met Vishnu on his way along the sky. And Narayana was gratified at that act of self-denial on the part of Garuda. And that deity, knowing no deterioration, said unto the ranger of the skies, "Oh, I am inclined to grant thee a boon." The ranger of the skies thereupon said, "I shall stay above thee." And he again spake unto Narayana these words, "I shall be immortal and free from disease without drinking Amrita." Vishnu said unto the son of Vinata, "Be it so." Garuda, receiving those 2 boons, told Vishnu, "I also shall grant thee a boon, therefore, let the possessor of the 6 attributes ask of me." Vishnu then asked the mighty Garuda to become his carrier. And he made the bird sit on the flagstaff of his car, saying, "Even thus thou shalt stay above me." And the ranger of the skies, of great speed, saying unto Narayana, "Be it so," swiftly wended on his way, mocking the wind with his fleetness. And while that foremost of all rangers of the skies, that first of winged creatures, Garuda, was coursing through the air after resting the Amrita, Indra hurled at him his thunderbolt. Then Garuda, the lord of birds, struck with thunderbolt, spake laughingly unto Indra engaged in the encounter, in sweet words, saying, I shall respect the Rishi Davichi, of whose bone the Vajra hath been made. I shall also respect the Vajra, and thee also of 1,000 sacrifices. I cast this feather of mine whose end thou shalt not attain. Struck with thy thunder I have not felt the slightest pain. And having said this, the king of birds cast a feather of his. And all creatures became exceedingly glad, beholding that excellent feather of Garuda so cast off. And seeing that the feather was very beautiful, they said, let this bird be called Suparna, having fair feathers. And Purandara of 1,000 eyes, witnessing this wonderful incident, thought that bird to be some great being and addressed him thus. And Indra said, O best of birds, I desire to know the limit of thy great strength. I also desire eternal friendship with thee. So ends the 33rd section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 30. Astika Parva continued. Soti continued, Garuda then said, O Purandara, let there be friendship between thee and me as thou desirest. My strength, know thou, is hard to bear. O thou of 1,000 sacrifices, the good never approve of speaking highly of their own strength, nor do they speak of their own merits. But being made a friend, and asked by thee, O friend, I will answer thee, although self-praise without reason is ever improper. I can bear, on a single feather of mine, O Sakra, this earth, with her mountains and forests and with the waters of the ocean, and with thee also stationed thereon. Know thou, my strength is such that I can bear without fatigue even all the worlds put together, with their mobile and immobile objects. Soti continued, O Saunika, after Garuda of great courage had thus spoken, Indra the chief of the gods, the wearer of the celestial crown, ever bent upon the good of the worlds, replied, saying, It is as thou sayest. Everything is possible in thee. Accept now my sincere and hearty friendship. And if thou hast no concern with the Soma, return it to me. Those to whom thou wouldst give it would always oppose us. Garuda answered, There is a certain reason for which the Soma is being carried by me. I shall not give the Soma to any one for drink. But, O thou of 1,000 eyes, after I have placed it down, thou, O Lord of the heavens, canst then, taking it up, instantly bring it away. Indra then said, O Oviparous one, I am highly gratified with these words now spoken by thee. O best of all rangers of the skies, accept from me any boon that thou desirest. Soti continued, then Garuda, recollecting the sons of Kadru and remembering also the bondage of his mother caused by an act of deception, owing to the well-known reason, viz., the curse of Aruna, said, Although I have power over all creatures, yet I shall do your bidding. Let, O Sakra, the mighty snakes become my food. The slayer of the Danavas having said unto him, Be it so, then went to Hari, the god of gods, of great soul, and the lord of yogins. And the latter sanctioned everything that had been said by Garuda. And the illustrious lord of heaven again said unto Garuda, I shall bring away the Soma when thou placest it down. And having said so, he bade farewell to Garuda. And the bird of fair feathers then went to the presence of his mother with great speed. And Garuda in joy then spake unto all the snakes, Here have I brought the Amrita. Let me place it on some kusa grass. O ye snakes, sitting here, drink of it after ye have performed your ablutions and religious rites. As said by you, let my mother become, from this day, free, for I have accomplished your bidding. The snakes having said unto Garuda, Be it so, then went to perform their ablutions. Meanwhile, Sakra taking up the Amrita, wended back to heaven. The snakes after performing their ablutions, their daily devotions, and other sacred rites, returned in joy, desirous of drinking the Amrita. They saw that the bed of kusa grass, whereon the Amrita had been placed was empty, the Amrita itself having been taken away by a counteract of deception. And they began to lick with their tongues the kusa grass, as the Amrita had been placed thereon. And the tongues of the snakes by that act became divided in twain. And the kusa grass, too, from the contact with Amrita, became sacred. Thenceforth, thus did the illustrious Garuda bring Amrita, from the heavens, for the snakes, and thus were the tongues of snakes divided by what Garuda did. Then the bird of fair feathers, very much delighted, enjoyed himself in those woods accompanied by his mother, of grand achievements, and deeply reverenced by all rangers of the skies, he gratified his mother by devouring the snakes. That man who would listen to this story, or read it out to an assembly of good Brahmanas, must surely go to heaven, acquiring great merit from the recitation of the feats of Garuda. And so ends the 34th section in the Astika Parva of the ADI. Parva. Section XXXV. Astika Parva continued. Saunaka said, O son of Sudha, thou hast told us the reason why the snakes were cursed by their mother, and why Vinata also was cursed by her son. Thou hast also told us about the bestowal of boons, by their husband, on Kadruha and Vinata. Thou hast likewise told us the names of Vinata's sons. But thou hast not yet recited to us the names of the snakes. We are anxious to hear the names of the principal ones. Soti said, O thou whose wealth is asceticism, from fear of being lengthy, I shall not mention the names of all the snakes. But I will recite the names of the chief ones. Listen to me. Sesha was born first, and then Vasuki. Then were born, Airavata, Taxhaka, Karkotaka, Dhananjaya, Kalakaya, the serpent Mani, Purana, Pinjarika, and Elopatra, Vamana, Nila, Anila, Kamasha, Savala, Aryaka, Yugra, Kalasapataka, Suramaka, Dadhamaka, Vimalapindaka, Apta, Karotaka, Samka, Valashika, Nishthanaka, Hamaguha, Nahusha, Pingla, Vahayakarna, Hastapada, Mudgarapindaka, Kambala Iswadara, Kalyaka, Vrita, Samvartaka, Padma, Mahapadma, Sankhamaka, Kushmandaka, Kashimaka, Pandarika, Karavira, Pushpadanstrika, Vilwaka, Vilwapandara, Mushakada, Sunkas Iras, Purnabhadra, Haridrika, Uprajita, Judika, Srivaha, Koravya, Dhritarashtra, Sankapinda, Virajas, Suvahua, Salapinda, Prabhakra, Hastipinda, Pitharika, Sumuksha, Kanapashana, Kuthara, Kunjara, Kumudat, Kilmudaksha, Titri, Halika, Kardama, Vaimulaka, Karkara, Akarkara, Kundodara, and Mahodara. Thus, O best of regenerate ones, have I said the names of the principal serpents. From fear of being tedious I do not give names of the rest. O thou whose wealth is asceticism, the sons of these snakes, with their grandsons, are innumerable. Reflecting upon this, I shall not name them. To thee, O best ascetics, in this world the number of snakes baffles calculation, there being many thousands and millions of them. So ends the 35th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 30. Astika Parva continued. Saunaka said, O child, thou hast named many of the serpents gifted with great energy and incapable of being easily overcome. What did they do after hearing of that curse? Soti said, the illustrious Sesha amongst them, of great renown, leaving his mother practiced hard penances, living upon air and rigidly observing his vows. He practiced these ascetic devotions, repairing to Gandhamadana, Vedri, Gokarna, the woods of Pushkara, and the foot of Himavat. And he passed his days in those sacred regions, some of which were sacred for their water and others for their soil, in the rigid observance of his vows, with singleness of aim, and his passions under complete control. And the grandsire of all, Brahma, saw that ascetic with knotted hair, clad in rags, and his flesh, skin, and sinews dried up, owing to the hard penances he was practicing. And the grandsire, addressing him, that penance practicing one of great fortitude, said, What is that thorn doest, O Sesha? Let the welfare of the creatures of the worlds also engage thy thoughts. O sinless one, thou art afflicting all creatures by thy hard penances. O Sesha, tell me the desire implanted in thy breast. And Sesha replied, My uterine brothers are all of wicked hearts. I do not desire to live amongst them. Let this be sanctioned by thee. Like enemies they are always jealous of one another. I am, therefore, engaged in ascetic devotions. I will not see them even. They never show any kindness for Vinata and her son. Indeed, Vinata's son capable of ranging through the skies, is another brother of ours. They always envy him. And he, too, is much stronger owing to the bestowal of that boon by our father, the high-souled Kasyapa. For these, I engaged in ascetic penances, and I will cast off this body of mine, so that I may avoid companionship with them, even in another state of life. Unto Sesha, who had said so, the grandsire said, O Sesha, I know the behavior of all thy brothers and their great danger owing to their offense against their mother. But O snake, a remedy for this hath been provided by me even beforehand. It behoveth thee not to grieve for thy brothers. O Sesha, ask of me the boon thou desirest. I have been highly gratified with thee, and I will grant thee today a boon. O best of snakes! It is fortunate that thy heart hath been set on virtue. Let thy heart be more and more firmly set on virtue. Then Sesha replied, O divine grandsire, this is the boon desired by me. Viz., may my heart always delight in virtue and in blessed ascetic penances, O Lord of all. Brahman said, O Sesha, I am exceedingly gratified with this thy self-denial and love of peace. But, at my command, let this act be done by thee for the good of my creatures. Bear thou, O Sesha, properly and well this earth so unsteady with her mountains and forests, her seas and towns and retreats, so that she may be steady. Sesha said, O divine Lord of all creatures, O bestower of boons, O Lord of the earth, Lord of every created thing, Lord of the universe, I will, even as thou sayest, hold the earth steady. Therefore, O Lord of all creatures, place her on my head. Brahman said, O best of snakes, go underneath the earth. She will herself give thee a crevice to pass through. And, O Sesha, by holding the earth, thou shalt certainly do what is prized by me very greatly. Soti continued, then the elder brother of the king of the snakes entering a hole, passed to the other side of the earth, and holding her, supported with his head that goddess with her belt of seas passing all round. Brahman said, O Sesha, O best of snakes, thou art the god Dharma. Because alone, with thy huge body, thou supportest the earth with everything on her, even as I myself, or Valavat, Indra, can. Soti continued, the snake, Sesha, the Lord Ananta, of great prowess, lives underneath the earth, alone supporting the world at the command of Brahman. And the illustrious grandsire, the best of the immortals, then gave unto Ananta the bird of fair feathers, viz., the son of Vinata, for Ananta's help. So ends the 36th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section XXXVII. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, that best of snakes, viz., Vasuki, hearing the curse of his mother, reflected how to render it abortive. He held a consultation with all his brothers, Airavata and others, intent upon doing what they deemed best for themselves. And Vasuki said, O ye sinless ones, the object of this curse is known to you. It behoveth us to strive to neutralize it. Remedies certainly exist for all curses, but no remedy can avail those cursed by their mother. Hearing that this curse hath been uttered in the presence of the immutable, the infinite, and the true one, my heart trembleth. Surely our annihilation hath come. Otherwise why should not the immutable Lord prevent our mother while uttering the curse? Therefore, let us consult today how we may secure the safety of the snakes. Let us not waste time. All of you are wise and discerning. We will consult together and find out the means of deliverance as did the gods of yore to regain lost Agni, who had concealed himself within a cave, so that Janamjaya's sacrifice for the destruction of the snakes may not take place, and so that we may not meet with destruction. Soti continued, thus addressed all the offspring of Kadru assembled together, and, wise in councils, submitted their opinions to one another. One party of the serpents said, we should assume the guise of superior Brahmanas, and beseech Janamjaya, saying, this, intended, sacrifice of yours ought not to take place. Other snakes thinking themselves wise said, we should all become his favorite counselors. He will then certainly ask for our advice in all projects. And we will then give him such advice that the sacrifice may be obstructed. The king, the foremost of wise men, thinking us of sterling worth, will certainly ask us about his sacrifice. We will say, it must not be. And pointing to many serious evils in this and the next worlds, we will take care that the sacrifice may not take place. Or, let one of the snakes, approaching, bite the person who, intending the monarch's good, and well acquainted with the rites of the snake sacrifice, may be appointed as the sacrificial priest, so that he will die. The sacrificial priest dying, the sacrifice will not be completed. We will also bite all those who, acquainted with the rites of the snake sacrifice, may be appointed Ritviks of the sacrifice, and by that means attain our object. Other snakes, more virtuous and kind, said, Oh, this counsel of yours is evil. It is not meet to kill Brahmanas in danger, that remedy is proper, which is blessed on the practices of the righteous. Unrighteousness finally destroyeth the world. Other serpents said, we will extinguish the blazing sacrificial fire by ourselves becoming clouds luminous with lightning and pouring down showers. Other snakes, the best of their kind, proposed, going, by night, let us steal away the vessel of Soma juice. That will disturb the right. Or, At that sacrifice, let the snakes, by hundreds and thousands, bite the people, and spread terror around. Or, let the serpents defile the pure food with their food-defiling urine and dung. Others said, let us become the king's Ritviks, and obstruct his sacrifice by saying at the outset, give us the sacrificial fee. He, the king, being placed in our power, will do whatever we like. Others there said, when the king will sport in the waters, we will carry him to our home and bind him, so that that sacrifice will not take place. Other serpents who deemed themselves wise, said, approaching the king, let us bite him, so that our object will be accomplished. By his death the root of all evil will be torn up. This is the final deliberation of us all, O thou who hearest with thy eyes. Then, do speedily what thou deemest proper. Having said this, they looked intently at Vasuki, that best of snakes. And Vasuki also, after reflecting, answered saying, yes, snakes. This final determination of you doth not seem worthy of adoption. The advice of you all is not to my liking. What shall I say which would be for your good? I think the grace of the illustrious Kasyapa, our father, can alone do us good. Yes, snakes, my heart doth not know which of all your suggestions is to be adopted for the welfare of my race as also of me. That must be done by me which would be to your will. It is this that makes me so anxious, for the credit or the discredit of the measure is mine alone. So ends the 37th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. Section 38. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, hearing the respective speeches of all the snakes, and hearing also the words of Vasuki, Elopatra began to address them, saying, that sacrifice is not one that can be prevented. Nor is King Janamejaya of the Pandava race from whom this fear proceedeth, such that he can be hindered. The person, O king, who is afflicted by fate hath recourse to fate alone, nothing else can be his refuge. Yea, best of snakes, this fear of ours hath fate for its root. Fate alone must be our refuge in this. Listen to what I say. When that curse was uttered, yea, best of snakes, in fear I lay crouching on the lap of our mother. Yea, best of snakes, and O Lord, Vasuki, of great splendor, from that place I heard the words the sorrowing gods spake unto the grandsire. The gods said, O grandsire, thou god of gods, who else than the cruel Kadru could thus, after getting such dear children, curse them so, even in thy presence? And, O grandsire, by thee also hath been spoken, with reference to those words of hers, be it so. We wish to know the reason why thou didst not prevent her. Brahman replied, the snakes have multiplied. They are cruel, terrible in form and highly poisonous. From desire of the good of my creatures, I did not prevent Kadru then. Those poisonous serpents and others who are sinful, biting others for no faults, shall, indeed, be destroyed, but not they who are harmless and virtuous. And here also, how, when the hour comes, the snakes may escape this dreadful calamity. There shall be born in the race of the Yayavaras a great rishi known by the name of Jarakaru, intelligent, with passions under complete control. That Jarakaru shall have a son of the name of Astika. He shall put a stop to that sacrifice. And those snakes who shall be virtuous shall escape therefrom. The gods said, O thou truth-knowing one, on whom will Jarakaru, that foremost Muni, gifted with great energy and asceticism, beget that illustrious son? Brahma answered, gifted with great energy. That best Brahmana shall beget a son possessed of great energy on a wife. of the same name as his. Vasuki, the king of the snakes, hath a sister of the name of Jarakaru, the son, of whom I speak, shall be born of her. And he shall liberate the snakes. Elopatra continued, the gods then said unto the grandsire, be it so. And the Lord Brahman, having said so unto the gods, went to heaven. O Vasuki, I see before me that sister of thine known by the name of Jarakaru. For relieving us from fear, give her as alms unto him, i.e. the Rishi, Jarakaru, of excellent vows, who shall roam abbegging for a bride. This means of release hath been heard of by me. Section 36. Astika Parva continued. Soti said, O best of regenerate ones, hearing these words of Elopatra. All the serpents, in great delight, exclaimed, well said, well said. And from that time Vasuki set about carefully bringing up that maiden, viz., his sister Jarakaru. And he took great delight in rearing her. And much time did not elapse from this, when the gods and the Asuras, assembling together, churned the abode of Varuna. And Vasuki, the foremost of all gifted with strength, became the churning cord. And directly the work was over, the king of the snakes presented himself before the grandsire. And the gods, accompanied by Vasuki, addressed the grandsire, saying, O Lord, Vasuki is suffering great affliction from fear of his mother's curse. It behoveth thee to root out the sorrow begotten of the curse of his mother, that hath pierced the heart of Vasuki, desirous of the will of his race. The king of the snakes is ever our friend and benefactor. O Lord of the gods, be gracious unto him and assuage his mind's fever. Brahman replied, O ye immortals, I have thought, in my mind, of what yet have said. Let the king of the snakes do that which hath been communicated to him before by Elopatra. The time hath arrived. Those only shall be destroyed that are wicked, not those that are virtuous. Jarakaru hath been born, and that Brahmana is engaged in hard ascetic penances. Let Vasuki, at the proper time, bestow on him his sister. Yet, gods, what hath been spoken by the snake Elopatra for the will of the snakes is true and not otherwise. Soti continued, then the king of the snakes, Vasuki, afflicted with the curse of his mother, hearing these words of the grandsire, and intending to bestow his sister of the Rishi Jarakaru, commanded all the serpents, a large numbers of whom were ever attentive to their duties, to watch the Rishi Jarakaru, saying, when the Lord Jarakaru will ask for a wife, come immediately and inform me of it. The will of our race depends upon it. Section XL. Astika Parva continued. Saunika said, O son of Sudha, I desire to know the reason why the illustrious Rishi whom thou hast named Jarakaru came to be so called on earth. It behoveth thee to tell us the etymology of the name Jarakaru. Soti said, Jara is said to mean waste, and Karu implies huge. This Rishi's body had been huge, and he gradually reduced it by severe ascetic penances. For the same reason, O Brahmanas, the sister of Vasuki was called Jarakaru. The virtuous Saunika, when he heard this, smiled and addressing Ugrasravas said, it is even so. Saunika then said, I have heard all that thou hast before recited. I desire to know how Astika was born. Soti, on hearing these words, began to relate according to what was written in the Sastras. Soti said, Vasuki, desirous of bestowing his sister upon the Rishi Jarakaru, gave the snakes necessary orders. But days went on, yet that wise Muni of rigid vows, deeply engaged in ascetic devotions, did not seek for a wife. That high-souled Rishi, engaged in studies and deeply devoted to asceticism, his vital seed under full control, fearlessly wandered over the whole earth and had no wish for a wife. Afterwards, once upon a time, there was a king, O Brahmana, of the name of Parikshit, born in the race of the Kauravas. And, like his great-grandfather Pandu of old, he was of mighty arms, the first of all bearers of bows in battle, and fond of hunting. And the monarch wandered about, hunting deer, and wild boars, and wolves, and buffaloes, and various other kinds of wild animals. One day, having pierced a deer with a sharp arrow and slung his bow on his back, he penetrated into the deep forest, searching for the animal here and there, like the illustrious Rudra himself of old pursuing in the heavens, bow in hand, the deer which was sacrifice, itself turned into that shape, after the piercing. No deer that was pierced by Parikshit had ever escaped in the wood with life. This deer, however wounded as before, fled with speed, as the proximate cause of the king's attainment to heaven. And the deer that Parikshit, that king of men, had pierced was lost to his gaze and drew the monarch far away into the forest. And fatigued and thirsty, he came across a Muni, in the forest, seated in a cow pen and drinking to his fill the froth oozing out of the mouths of calves sucking the milk of their dams. And approaching him hastily, the monarch, hungry and fatigued, and raising his bow, asked that Muni of rigid vows, saying, O Brahmana, I am King Parikshit, the son of Abhimanyu. A deer pierced by me hath been lost. Hast thou seen it? But that Muni, observing then the vow of silence, spoke not unto him a word. And the king in anger thereupon placed upon his shoulder a dead snake, taking it up with the end of his bow. The Muni suffered him to do it without protest.